And good evening. Thanks for joining us. The top of the hour, our breaking news, a reaction to President Obama's decision today to commute the sentence of Chelsea Manning, the former Army private doing 35 years at Leavenworth for leaking hundreds of thousands of government documents. Some called her a whistleblower, some called her a traitor. Whatever you call her, the decision to free her in May has touched off what's likely to be the final controversy of the Obama administration. Our Justice correspondent Pamela Brown has the latest on all of it. She joins us now. How much of this was a surprise? I mean, has the White House been signaling they might do this for some time?
Well, the White House has stayed pretty tight-lipped when it comes to who would get the clemency grant. But today, Josh Earnest, the White House spokesman, in his press conference, signaled that it could be a possibility. He sort of set the stage before the official announcement was made when he drew the distinction between the Chelsea Manning case, in his view, and the Edward Snowden case, saying that Manning had pleaded guilty, that she had apologized, that she had already served some time. But it is not only controversial but surprising to a lot of people when you look back at President Obama's time in the White House and his tough stance on government leaks. In fact, his administration has prosecuted 9 or 10 such cases, and according to the New York Times, that's more than the past presidents combined. And of course, as we know, Chelsea Manning committed one of the biggest and most embarrassing leaks of classified information in U.S. history. And not only that, Anderson, but she really put WikiLeaks on the map and made it into essentially what it is today. And as we know, it also played a role as recently as the U.S. election, the administration says, Anderson.
And just a few days ago, the founder of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, who's holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, he indicated he would agree to U.S. extradition if Manning was granted clemency. Any indication that would actually happen?
Right. So his attorney tonight actually said that he stands by what he says. And then another attorney says that he wants further clarification about his status with Department of Justice. It's interesting, though, because the U.S. has not formally made an extradition request for Julian Assange. In fact, he hasn't even been charged. The U.S. has just come out and said that he is part of an investigation, that he is the subject of an investigation. So it's yet to be seen how this will play out from here, Anderson.
All right, Pam, thanks very much. Journalist Glenn Greenwald advocated for Chelsea Manning's release, counts himself as a friend. He is co-founding editor of The Intercept and a contributor to her legal defense fund. We spoke tonight shortly before we went to air. Glenn, why does Chelsea Manning deserve to be released? I mean, she was found guilty, convicted by a military tribunal.
Well, let's remember she received the largest sentence in American history for somebody who released information to the public, as opposed to, say, giving it to a foreign adversary or selling it to a foreign government. So she got a 35-year prison, which is wildly excessive in comparison to what other people have served who have done similar things. If you look at the top brass in the military, like David Petraeus, who leaked far more sensitive secrets than Chelsea Manning did, he didn't spend a day in prison. And I think most of all was the conditions under which she was detained. The U.S. found that early on her detention was abusive and inhumane. She's had a lot of difficulty in a men's prison as a trans woman. She's tried to kill herself twice and was punished for it. So I think overall, when you combine the excessive sentence with the humanitarian considerations, President Obama thought it was just to commute her sentence.
You know, Paul Ryan has put out a statement calling this outrageous, saying that that she gave up some of the most important secrets for the U.S. It's interesting, though, a lot of that rhetoric doesn't quite meet the facts. I mean, Bob Gates back in 2010 said that it was kind of overwrought, the language that was being used about the damage that was done. And even, I think, according to Reuters in 2011, an internal report, surveys of the State Department found that the damage was not quite as bad and was nowhere near as bad as some had feared.
Well, there's literally not one case where anybody has been injured, let alone killed, as a result of this release. Not a single one. McClatchy investigated thoroughly in 2011 and said the Pentagon had wildly exaggerated the extent to which this had caused harm. But I think the most important point is the U.S. government classifies documents according to how sensitive they are, and the top level of secrecy is top secret, and there's gradations beneath that. The documents that Chelsea Manning released, not a single one was top secret. They were all very low-level classifications of either confidential or secret. So Paul Ryan really doesn't know what he's talking about.
I mean, diplomats did say that there was, in some cases, sort of a chilling effect on some allies' willingness to share information in the way they did before, but not necessarily the kind of the long-term damage that many had feared. Do you think this has any impact on Edward Snowden's case?
I think that the reason that President Obama acted was because Chelsea Manning had actually been convicted, expressed remorse, and then served 7 years in prison, as opposed to Edward Snowden, who to this day says he regrets that nothing that he did. In fact, if he regrets anything, it's that he didn't do it earlier. The American people should have learned about this earlier. And so, no, I think it's very unlikely that President Obama intends to commute Snowden's sentence, let alone pardon him, because he doesn't in any way say that what he did is wrong. He's quite proud of what he did, except for the fact that he should have done it earlier.
Do you think this affects Julian Assange at all? Because Julian Assange had said he would be willing to accept extradition to the United States if Chelsea Manning were released.
As far as Julian Assange is concerned, he's in the Ecuadorian embassy with asylum, not because, at least at the moment, the U.S. is trying to extradite him, but because the government of Sweden is. And so, what might actually affect Julian Assange's situation is that Donald Trump has become an admirer of WikiLeaks, because so much of the information they released this year was about the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee, and he's about to become president, and that may help his case.
It is interesting, and I saw you tweet about this. You know, many on the right now are sort of embracing WikiLeaks and touting them, and yet one of their biggest sources ever was Chelsea Manning, who they are critical of. It seems sort of an odd way to look at things.
Yeah, everything is sort of turned around. You know, I've been writing about and defending WikiLeaks for many years, going back to 2009 and 10. And back then, there were almost no Republicans supportive of the position I was arguing, and there were a lot of Democrats who thought WikiLeaks was doing the right thing because they were leaking information about the wars that George Bush had started. 6 years later, everything is pretty much reversed. Democrats almost universally despise WikiLeaks and view Julian Assange as a traitor, whereas there's a lot of support on the right now for WikiLeaks, and yet suddenly here you have WikiLeaks' most important source, the person who put them on the map in terms of being able to have a major impact on geopolitical affairs, who got pardoned or had her sentence commuted by President Obama. And there's a lot of anger on the right, and there's this sort of cognitive dissonance. On the one hand, they regard WikiLeaks as heroic. On the other hand, they want to see Chelsea Manning rot in prison for the rest of her life. And it seems pretty clear that they only like WikiLeaks to the extent that WikiLeaks' disclosures help the Republican Party.
Glenn Greenwald, good to talk to you, Glenn. Thanks.
Thanks, Anderson.